Have you ever been so controlled by emotions where, everything that you do, say you lash out or something like that, right? That anything you do is basically controlled by them because, and, after there's a point where you kind of reconsider, right? Like, why'd I do this, right? Because I think someone in the comments, actually, I know someone in the comments said that they wanted to do a video like this, so I decided why not. I'm sorry that I didn't post a video yesterday. I was sick, right? But today's video is mainly going to be about controlling your emotions, right? And so, there are plenty of times, at least in my life, where I've either lashed out or, I felt like so sad to the point where, I didn't know what was going to happen, right? Because, like, it was really hard, right? That's besides the point. The point is, right, is that there are some emotions that, just completely take over, right? Which could be a good thing, right? But it could also be a bad thing, right? And so how does like someone control them, right? Or how does someone at least keep it manageable, right? And so, oh my gosh. And so in my life, right, at least for as long as, I've been alive, right? Which is not as long as one might think, right? But it's long enough to the point where I've experienced, really bad moments in my life. At least I like to call them really bad, right? These are the moments where if I had the chance to go back, I would go back and I would change them, right? And there are plenty of these moments in my life, right? But only a couple really stick out to me, right? And I feel like that some people might have that, that one moment where they really lashed out at someone or where they were in a really bad place, right? Where they didn't know what was going to happen, right? And that's fine, right? That's a good thing, right? Because that means you've experienced those emotions and you know what to do, right? And so I think that, at least in my experience, whenever I'm getting like genuinely mad, right, I kind of have to sit and think, right? Like, is this really what I'm going to be wasting my time on, right? Because think about it, right? You have, you have like a limited amount of time, right? And so do you really want to be spending all your time fixated on, on how like Jimmy, took me down in Minecraft, right? Like no one really cares about that, right? I mean, you might in the moment, yeah, that's fine, right? But later on, you're gonna realize, hey, I don't really care, right? It's fine, right? You're just gonna forget about it and you're gonna go on with your day, right? It might become this like joke, this inside joke with your friends, you and Jimmy, right? Oh, remember that one time, you took me down in Minecraft, right? But like, the point that I'm trying to get at here is that majority of these times, right, you're not gonna remember, right? You're not gonna remember when, someone stole your stuff in like a game or something like that. You're not gonna remember when you fall from this game, for example, which I've done numerous amount of times, right? And so, these points are basically just like little things, right? It's like, let's just say it's like brushing your teeth, right? You don't like realize you're brushing your teeth. You kind of just do it sometimes, right? And there are some days where, you really remember when you brush your teeth, right? Because that could be at like a dentist office, right? When they tell you to brush your teeth, blah, 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 right? No one really cares about that, right? Let's be so for real. But the dentist, or like, for example, yeah, in this example, the dentist, you're going to remember when they say to brush your teeth because you don't like them, right? At least you shouldn't. No, I'm just kidding. At least, I mean, you should like the dentist, but like, I don't think anyone does, right? Let's be so for real. And so when it comes to these moments, it's kind of like you have to stop and think, right? Like, is it really worth me, like, lashing out or, thinking irrationally, right? And it kind of takes a moment, right? And so sometimes, a lot of people, what they do is they'll take themselves out of the situation. They'll pause, right? Which I think, no offense, right? I think that's dumb, right? Because I don't think it needs to take that much thought into it to, regain your thing. But I mean, I know to some that's a very good method that they use. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, right? I'm saying, if it works for you, do what works for you. But what works for me is I kind of just sit there, right? And I'm like, I've been through so much worse in my life, right? I've been through so many more embarrassing moments. I've been through so many more, annoying moments, so many more sad moments. And all these moments, right, are kind of just sitting there, right? Because, my whole life is basically made up of those moments, right? Along with some other stuff. But a lot of the time, right, it's just these moments, right? And you have to realize, right, it gets to a point where, you know, you have to think, because I've been through so much worse than this. So like, why am I reacting to such a trivial thing, right? And that really changes my mindset, at least. I mean, this might not work for you, right? You might need to take your space to, think about the situation again, right? Because I mean, yeah, I think, in my opinion, in terms of mentally, right, mental wise, I think that's the best option, right? I know I was clowning on it, but it really is the best option, because you give yourself the most amount of time to, think it through and think, hey, I'm acting a little stupid right now, right? So I'm just gonna, rethink about it, right? We'll get back to this. You could talk to me later, because if I talk to you right now, I'm probably not gonna be me, right? And that's a really good strategy, but I think it just takes too much time, right? Because personally, I don't have that much time to think it over, right? I'm trying to live my life to the fullest. At least I like to think I am. And so by me spending and wasting, I won't say wasting, but by me spending all this time fixated on something like that, I think it'd get me more mad, right? Because I'm constantly thinking about it, right? So it's like, I don't know, right? I don't know. That's just me, though. You guys might have, your different opinions, but I don't like that. But then again, if it works for you, it doesn't really matter, right? I'm just saying that with there not being, that much time on here, I like to spend, my time as best as I can. And me fixating on something kind of dumb is, in my opinion, right? It's just dumb, right? I don't know. People have different opinions, so it's not really worth getting mad over it in the comments, right? But I definitely think that everybody's different, right? And everybody has their thing that works for them. So do whatever works for you, right? And it's also important to remember who you're talking to, right? Or who you're lashing out on, because if it's a friend, right, they're going to be more forgiving than like a boss or like your elder, because 90% of the time they're not going to forget, right? Because it kind of creates that perspective. Like if it's your friend, right, you and your friend joke around a lot, right? So I mean, for the most part, it's somewhat fine to lash out at them, because they're not going to remember it, right? Unless you had this super big crash out. But 90% of the time, they're not gonna remember what you did, right? They're not gonna remember, oh, Timmy was so mad at me, blah 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 blah, right? That's not gonna be it, unless like you're just weird and you're like that, which I recommend you guys aren't like that, because that's really weird. But anyways, like I was saying, it also depends on who you're talking to, because if you're talking to someone like a teacher and you lash out on them, right, that's just like kind of not right. And or if you say, like, oh, just give me some time to think about it after they gave me a bad grade, right, and you're about to crash out on them, and you say, oh, give me a little more time before I talk to you again, like that's just dumb, right? That's kind of stupid. And in those moments, I like to think. So I just rewatched the video and I got cut off, right, because something happened. And then the second recording that I had, I kind of didn't record the audio. So yes, that is on me. I'm sorry. But like I was saying, because I kind of rewatched it, I have no idea what I said for the next 3 minutes. So I'm just kind of going to wing it real quick. But I'm going to keep this kind of short. Anyways, like I was saying, in situations like that, right, you just kind of got to, at least in my opinion, count to like 5 seconds, right? Because it's when you do like dumb things like that, right? Because if someone sees you, right, and you're just counting to 5 in the middle of an argument, it's gonna seem kind of weird, right? So by you kind of doing that, right, first of all, it kind of throws the person off, right? And also, it kind of in my opinion at least, it kind of resets your brain to where you kind of like think, hey, maybe this is like kind of dumb, right? Because by you, I think it's like counterintuitive, right? By you doing something dumb, you're kind of like realizing that you're being dumb, I guess. I don't know if that makes any sense. If it does, please let me know, because I don't know, I feel like I had a better explanation the first time. I just kind of lost it, but it's okay, right? Because I could always make another one of these, right? And so it's fine, right? Like you just gotta think about it like that, right? Because even though I spent like a good amount of time, and I probably will never say the same words again, right? I could still, always make another one, right? It might not be as good, but it's going to be as good as I can, right? And I feel like that's a big thing you have to realize, right? When you do something, right, and you realize, oh, like for example, let's just say you lose, right? You lose a game and you're like, oh shucks, you kind of have to realize, right, that was the best that you can do, right? And so that's important because the things you can do in life are very limited, right? You can only do a certain amount of things, right, according to your abilities, right? And I think that people have different judgments on themselves, but that doesn't matter, right? Because the point is that people do stuff, right? And when they get mad, they can't do it, right? You just have to like realize, maybe that's all I can do, right? Maybe that's all I was supposed to do, because maybe I was supposed to make this again, right? Maybe I was supposed to realize and figure out, that this is like actually something better that I said than the other clip, because I actually did say this, right? Because I wasn't thinking about it, right? So maybe, this is the best I'm gonna give, right? And I think I just have to accept that, right? Because if I don't, and if I keep on talking about, oh, how good the other clip was, it kind of defeats the purpose, right, of making another one, because then you kind of waste this one on like squandering or like talking about how good the other one was and how you can't replicate it, right? Which that's fine, right? Like that doesn't matter, but that kind of just wastes time, right? And that kind of leaves you with regrets, right? Because then you're regretting, oh, I could have made such a better one like this, right? And you never really want to live life with regrets. At least that's what I've learned, right? Because you're gonna remember your regrets a lot more than you're gonna remember other things, right? At least in my experiences, right? Like I regret a bunch of things, right? Don't get me wrong, you're not gonna live life with no regrets, but you should definitely try, because there are these moments that you can't relive again, right? There's people that you can't see ever again. So, when you have that opportunity, I'd say just take it, right? Shoot your shot, right? If they reject you, oh well, right? Don't take it out on yourself. Don't let your emotions drag you down, right? Just think on how you could learn, right? Because that's what life is about. Life's about learning, It's about learning from your mistakes. That's a really big thing, and it's about improving, right? Because without improving, then what are you really doing, right? Because then you're just gonna stay the same, and staying the same is no fun, right? At least that's in my experience, right? And I think I've went a little too long on this video. So with that being said, I really hope you guys enjoyed, and thank you for the person who commented about this. If you guys have any other video ideas, please leave it in the comments. Sorry, I'm really trying to wrap this up. And yeah, with that being said, I really hope you guys enjoyed. I'm gonna go. I'm still really sick. My head hurts a lot. So yeah, that's it for me, and bye.